How serious a moment is this? It seems that Europe possibly has come to the point where it may be entirely responsible for its defence.
It could be like that, and it may not be like that. And that's the problem of dealing with Donald Trump, because he says things in Florida, where he appears to be at the moment, and his aides say slightly different things. And it's not, and people are just not consistent with each other. So it's very difficult to actually know. It is a serious time. It's serious because Russia is being brought in from the cold in some ways by Trump. Negotiations will begin on an end to the war, but they're far, far away from actually ending the war. We have known for some time that Trump believes that Europeans are free riders and therefore they should do much more for themselves. And that's been said again, but at the same time, it's also been said by officials that they don't, they don't see the US leaving NATO or abandoning Europe altogether. So it does feel serious. It does feel important. And I don't think Europeans can sort of sit back and hope it all blows over and just wait and see. They've got to be a bit more proactive than they have been in dealing with this situation. But the risk is you can make it worse if you're not careful.
You wrote in your piece that the European leaders were pretty shocked at the words of JD Vance and then obviously Trump. But like you say, he's long held the view that Europe have been freeloaders. Could it really have been that much of a surprise to the European leaders?
I don't think the moves on Ukraine should have been a great surprise. And they didn't come actually, I mean, it was news the way that Trump had the conversation with Putin, but he'd signaled in advance that he was going to do that at some point, and Putin's response wasn't a surprise, and that this would begin with US-Russia negotiations wasn't a surprise. After all, the Europeans have had their own chances to talk with the Russians, and they, apart from Olaf Scholz, in one call recently, they haven't really taken them because they're not convinced that good will come of it. So I don't think I think complaining about not being part of that is sort of missing what they should have expected, and isn't that surprising. The real problem with Vance is this was an extraordinary speech for a vice president to give, even though you know his views. When everybody's thinking about what does this mean for European security and Ukraine, to start talking as if the real problem is nothing to do with the Russians, but is to do with the fact that not enough attention is paid to the extreme right, and that the only issue that matters is one of immigration, is both rude, insensitive, and extraordinary. And therefore, it's not surprising that this got a very stony reaction. But Vance isn't a particularly important player in the Ukraine story. The key people to watch, in addition to Trump himself, are Rubio, the Secretary of State, and Waltz, the National Security Advisor. And they'd be much more cautious in their utterances.
Subsequently, we've already had this idea mooted by the Prime Minister, by Keir Starmer, that somehow European troops, and that would include UK troops, might have this role in holding the peace in Ukraine. But I just want to ask you, what would that look like? What would peacekeeping entail? Because I think your colleague at King's College, Sam Green, wrote for us at the New Statesman that it would take a heck of a lot of troops. I mean, bare minimum 50,000 troops. I mean, what is Keir Starmer thinking of when he says that?
Well, I mean, I don't think he's expecting to do it all by himself.
No, sure.
But the difficulty is, and Sam Green's about right, but to get 50,000 troops, you actually have to have a commitment of more like 150,000, because some are training, some are recuperating, and some are actually deployed. And it's fair to say that though France and the UK are quite keen on this idea, the Swedes and others have shown interest, two key countries, the Poles and the Germans, have sort of contained their enthusiasm, shall we say, and a wait and see. And I think my own view is this would make sense if you could do it, not as a peacekeeping force, it's completely the wrong phrase.
What would it be then?
Peacekeeping suggests, UN resolution, blue helmets, lightly defended, impartial, sitting between the two forces. We're talking about something that would be behind the Ukrainian front line as a significant force to add to the risks of Russia should they fail to comply with a ceasefire or whatever has been agreed. So that's why you need a quite chunky force that can properly defend itself and hurt the aggressor, and presumably would have air power with it and so on. And as Starmer observed on Monday, you really want to have some link with the Americans, which of course something Trump doesn't particularly want to offer at the moment, though he praised the idea in an otherwise strange interview of the UK and the French doing something of this sort for Ukraine. I would think we've got to wait more to see what a deal is possible, what it looks like, whether it's a ceasefire or a full peace settlement or whatever, before things would move quickly on that.
But in terms of the feasibility of any of this, I mean, we've had a fair few questions from New Statesman podcast listeners, actually. So JJ, for example, he's talking about what are our defence capabilities at the moment. We hear about this a lot, and whether Europe would in some way be relying on our support to ensure the continent's long-term stability. I think that might be a bit unfair. As you said, sort of France are talking about it as well. Olaf Scholz, not very enthusiastic. But can we actually do it, even if the will were there and there is some kind of agreement?
Well, I mean, Scholz may not be Chancellor for
yes,
much longer,
yeah, so indeed.
We'll see what position he's in. So the answer is yes, we can do something, but not vast amounts. And to be frank, one of the reasons that the British and the French would be important in this mix is because they are nuclear powers, and that's something again that adds to the risk, but also adds to the risk to us, of course, should they be attacked. So the UK contribution to this would not be large, but I think the UK approach to Ukraine from Boris Johnson's time is to be the first mover, has been to say, look, this is the sort of thing we need to do. We're prepared to make this sort of commitment, but it only works if others come in behind. I think that's the way in which the UK has approached this, to put down a marker, say this is what needs to be done, and here we are, look, we're prepared to do it.
The Americans have said that they're after, well, Donald Trump has said that he's after an enduring, sustainable and acceptable to all sides deal. But yet you write, it won't take long before it becomes apparent that Russia's starting position is incompatible with Ukraine's sovereignty. I mean, where would you put the likelihood of any kind of negotiated settlement that can be agreed upon broadly at the moment? How close do you think we are?
I mean, my inclination is still to say quite low.
Yeah.
I mean, the basic problem is that in the end, if Trump wants this deal, Zelensky's got to agree. Now, I mean, they're going through a rocky patch in their relationship at the moment. After Zelensky's put an awful lot of effort into trying to be nice to Trump, but the fact is, it's not unless the Ukrainians sign up, then it won't happen. But I think what Trump wants, and actually I think what would suit the Ukrainians, is a simple ceasefire. And then let's see if we can talk about the future. But Putin has said he doesn't want that. He wants all these issues to be sorted before he agrees to a ceasefire. Now, Putin's got his own choices to make. His economy is starting to hit headwinds. They've made surprisingly little progress given their advantages. So Putin may change his view on that. But their position, as set out at the moment, bears no relationship to what the Americans say they're after. At the moment, somebody's got to make a lot of concessions, and it isn't only the Ukrainians. I think many Ukrainians understand that, at least for the moment, they're not going to get a lot of their territory back. But Russia wants more of their territory. I mean, that's part of the Russian demand. Now, again, I think Rubio and Waltz understand this. How much Trump does, I have no idea. I think Europe has got to do more. Trump isn't the first to say Europeans really are much larger, stronger, wealthier than Russia? Why is it that they seem to be so pathetic when looking after themselves? The best thing to come out of this is sort of the shock effect of realizing you've got no choice in the matter, even as I think is the case, that you're pretty anxious to keep the Americans involved to a degree in the hope that somebody more sensible on these things replaces Trump. You've still got to do more now. And if, Trump does represent the way of the future, you certainly need to do more now, because it's going to take you a long time to adjust.